Hi there, are you looking a way to improve your VR performance without buying an expensive GPU? Well, I went from this into this just by using some software tweaks. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. And this video will be centered around the SteamVR settings, but you can apply the same principles from this video to other headsets as well. So when I got my HTC Pro Vive, which is a SteamVR headset, I want to find out how can I tweak and improve the performance of my experience. And here is what I have figured out. So when you enter the SteamVR menu, we first see the general settings, and what you really want to adjust is the render resolution, because just like in your monitor you have a resolution, you have also a specific resolution for the screens within the headset, and the way how you adjust the sharpness or the clarity in VR is by adjusting Supersampling settings. And this you can find under the render resolution. When we click on custom, we see the resolution per eye is set for my headset to 2468 times 2740 pixels. And here we have 150%, which means that we are supersampling 1.5 times more pixels to the screens inside the headset over the default value calculated for your headset. One thing to note here is that even if you adjust this setting into 100, I get a reading of 2016 times 2240, which is not actually the physical pixel size of HTC Vive Pro. This is due to the distortion that happens to a VR scene that is rendered, where the headset's native resolution would result in very bad image quality, and therefore super sampled by a factor of 1.4. This value might change from headset to headset, depending on the rendering technique used and the distortion that it causes. You don't need to worry about this, it is just something that happens on the background. And according to SteamVR, the optimal render resolution for my system and my headset is 150%. I have a Ryzen 3600 and Nvidia GeForce 2080, and depending on your system, SteamVR might determine that this number is either higher or smaller, but this is automatically determined by SteamVR, and this should be running fairly fine on your system. If you don't want to tweak anything, I would really recommend leaving everything to default and try playing that way, and only if you have any issues, then you can start tweaking things. Other thing I have discovered is that this is not the only place where you can affect the resolution. So there's actually another place in SteamVR, and that you can find by going to video. And then we have new setting per application video settings. When we open that, we have another slider, custom resolution multiplier, where we can further adjust the resolution that will be rendered on our headset. Now, when the default setting has been set to 150%, and then we go to per application settings, that same resolution will be shown here. When we increase the amount, then we are multiplying the global setting with the indicated amount. By default, this is set to 100, so there is no additional supersampling. So essentially, these two values, the global resolution per eye and the custom resolution multiplier, are actually multiplied by each other. For example, if our resolution at 100% is 2016 times 2240, and we super sample that times 2, and then we go per application video settings, and we downscale this with 50%. We end up with the final resolution in application of 2016 times 2240 again. If you go and edit the per application settings, the resolution that you see here will be your final resolution that you will get inside the game. To make things more confusing, there might be a separate setting in-game to adjust the rendering resolution or the super sampling, and if that's the case, it might be that the game will not use the custom resolution multiplier in SteamVR, but it will use the setting which is available in-game. So this is the reason why I would advise to go to the global settings, remember the optimal resolution that the Steam wants you to run at, bring the slider down to 100, then firstly set super sampling in game, but if the game does not have super sampling settings, then go to the per application settings in SteamVR and set the value there. This way you have the best control on which resolution will be rendered, and that can be adjusted per application, depending on how demanding the game is. So just to show the performance, on the default settings in Dirt Rally 2.0, we can see that the game is actually running pretty well. The experience is smooth and consistent, but the frame rate is actually cut to half into 45 frames per second, and this means that the motion smoothing is kicking in. This means that my system is not able to produce solid 90 frames per second fast enough. So in order to provide a smooth experience, the frame rate is cut into half, and the remaining 45 frames are artificially generated for it to appear that we are running on 90 frames per second. Other values we need to keep our eyes on are the GPU frame time and the CPU frame time. Here you really want to see values under 11 milliseconds, and if you can hit that number, then you should be able to produce full 90 frames per second. Here my GPU frame time is hovering around 15 milliseconds, so there is not enough time to have smooth 90 frames, and therefore we are cut down into half, into 45 frames per second, and OpenVR is filling in the other 45 frames just by approximating what should be in the next frame. Okay, so how can we improve this? So in order to improve the performance, I wanted to try different resolutions. So for that, I set the render resolution to custom and the rendering resolution per eye to 100%, and also ensuring I have also 100% in the per application settings. And because ideally I want to hit 90 frames per second at all times, we have a throttling behavior setting which we can switch from auto to fixed, and this allows us to tell SteamVR to always try to run at maximum frame rate, which is 90 frames per second for my headset. Or here we could also limit the frame rate to 45 at all times, or even smaller numbers, but I don't see why anybody would do this in VR because it'll be a horrible experience. And this is how it looks like. Here we can see that we are not hitting the 90 frames per second, and our GPU frame time is still over 11 milliseconds, so we are still struggling. The CPU frame times are fine, but now when we forced the game to run on 90 Hz, the experience is more jagged. I have some stutters all over. It's not really pleasant to drive like this for longer periods of times. So this is very unstable and you don't want this in VR. So apparently my computer doesn't have enough juice to run full 90 Hz per second, or I just need to make the picture super blurry by downscaling the image really much. But luckily, F. Holger has made OpenVR DLL with AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution Upscaler. And if you don't know what AMD Fidelity FX is, It's pretty much the equivalent of Nvidia's DLSS. So the software renders the frames in a lower resolution and then attempts to recreate and upscale those rendered frames into the desired resolution. The original version requires you to extract the files into the game folders, but luckily Tappy287 has created an application that helps us configuring the software. So I will have the links to both of these in the description of the video. You really need to download only the OpenVR FSR app, but in case there will be a new version of the FidelityFX upscaler, then you might want to go and download the newest version of this one and just follow the instructions in the application on how to update this plugin. At the moment, the newest version is 1.3. When you have the OpenVR FSR app open, it will scan your computers and it will see your Steam games. And I have already installed this plugin into a couple of games, and those will be shown with green color. You can also filter by the games that support OpenVR or do not support OpenVR. So installing this plugin is as easy as expanding the game and then clicking on install plugin. For Dirt Rally 2 I have already installed, and after the plugin has been installed we have a couple of options. We can enable or disable the upscaler, we can choose the render scale, we can adjust the sharpness, radius, we can apply MIP bias, and we can have a debug mode on or off. With the render scale, we will effectively downscale the required frames from SteamVR into whatever value we set up here. For example, if our settings in SteamVR or Dirt Rally 2 are 149% of supersampling into 2460 times 2732 pixels. If we set the render scale here into, let's say, 0.5, which would be 50%, so this will downscale the resolution in the SteamVR. So this would be downscaled into 1230 times 1300 approximately, and that will be the rendering resolution, which will require much less pixels to be rendered by the GPU, and that will require less resources. And after frames have been rendered, then those lower resolution frames will be upscaled up to the resolution that the SteamVR was showing. So then the upscaler will try to match this resolution. As we just did the test without no supersampling, let's do the same test but applying the supersampling options and keeping everything else the same. So we will still try to hit the 90 frames per second, and look at that. We are running on 90 frames pretty much all the time, and our GPU frame times dropped to under 11 milliseconds and CPU frame times are slightly better. And the experience with these settings was very good. Just you can definitely see that the rendered picture is not that sharp anymore. When there is some sharp edges or power lines, those will shimmer. You will definitely see that. But the experience overall is much smoother because now we have full 90 frames at all times. And also please keep in mind that I am running all these tests with the same graphics settings, and the graphics settings I have optimized in a way where I wanted to have maximum amount of realism without affecting the performance too much. So what I did, I just tuned the settings up to a point where I couldn't see a significant difference anymore. I think overall the settings are similar to medium ones. I will leave a link to a picture with all my settings in the description. So only question that is left is how far I can push this, and after some trial and error trying different resolution and different settings, I ended up going with the custom resolution multiplier at 120, and this would provide me the best image quality but still solid 90 frames per second without no stutters. So just a quick note about the motion smoothing setting here. If you are using the default settings, it might be fine leaving it on, but I noticed that at certain situations it can be very distracting. I hope I can have a video about that on screen right now. So I prefer having it off. For me it feels overall more solid experience, and this will only kick in if your computer cannot handle all, for example, 90 frames per second like for my headset. Then we have also the advanced supersample filtering, which from my tests wasn't affecting the performance very much. The purpose of this filter is to smoothen out those jagged edges and reduce the shimmering that you often see in VR. You can try it on or off, but at the moment I think most likely the image looks slightly better when you have this on, but it didn't affect the performance that much. So please feel free to install that plugin and test it out, and please let me know in the comments what is your system and what kind of results you had. I will be always available at the Battle Rollers Discord. We are an enthusiastic sim racing community, and I will be sharing my experiences about further experiments in there. I was also planning to do some benchmarks on other sim racing games, so let me know in the comments what games you would like to see, and I will be sure to share my results in the Battle Rollers Discord. And if this is maybe second or third video that you see from me, maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss any upcoming tutorials and videos. Oh man, this video took way too long to make. I'm finally glad it's over. I'm sure you're glad too. If you're happy this video ended, hit that like button. I really didn't think that benchmarks could be so exhausting. Respect to anybody doing benchmarks. Man, it's a hard job.